Hi guys, I'm Judy Elmore and I'm a freelance editor with Black Wolf Editorial Services. Over the past few videos, we have been talking about working with critique partners and beta readers and how to handle feedback. Today, we're going to talk about providing feedback, an important skill to do if you're going to be carrying on with writing. There are different levels of feedback and they all have their different eyes, if you will. You first have the conceptual feedback. Is the concept that you are looking at, is it worth exploring? Is there anything that they should be considered? This will be the type of thing that I might get from a mentoring client where they have a theory, an idea, a story that they're looking at writing, and I'll give them a little bit of insight as to what maybe they need to be thinking about from a socialistic point of view, or maybe some things they need to be thinking about in terms of their research, just so they know whether it's worth looking at, and I'll help them strengthen the premise. Then you have your broad overview, and this is where you're looking at overall plot structure as well as character development, and it's a general comments. And then you get the more in-depth review where you're looking at story flow, dialogue, narrative voice. The services that I provide through Black Wolf Editorial will be a combination of all three of these aspects of feedback, because I do look at that broad overview, but I also look at that in-depth, looking at the story flow, the dialogue, narrative structure, as well as the concept. And then you have the nitty-gritty feedback, where you're looking at the word choices, you're looking at the punctuation and grammar. That typically falls under copy editing, but hey, it's still feedback and I will provide it within Black Wolf. Before you start, and this is whether you're working with a critique partner or a beta reader or an editor, you need to define the level of feedback that you are after. When do you want the feedback by? When is it needed by? And in terms of you giving the feedback to somebody else, you need to be honest with the amount of time that it's going to take you to do that feedback, to do the reading and to look at it. Create backup files. If somebody sends you a file of a story, they send you a Word document or they send you a PDF, make a backup file. Take the original and put it somewhere where you haven't touched it. So that way if things go hinky and you lose your comments and bits and pieces that you're giving, especially if you're going to be putting them directly into the file, annotations, if you don't have the original file, you could be in a situation where you're going, sorry, I've lost the file and my computer went bzzz. Yeah, take backups. And make notes as you go. As you're reading through something, take notes along the way. What are your first impressions? Because those first impressions actually are vital information for a reader to provide to a writer, because the writer needs to know, where is things going a bit off track? Am I keeping my reader engaged? Those first impressions are important. Highlight any issues that you might encounter that could potentially need to be worked on, and make notes of any questions that you might have. Maybe the answer's a bit further later down the road, and maybe that information needs to be a little bit sooner. When we are looking at manuscripts, there is always going to be this level of believability and social sensitivity. Stories should be believable within the world that is presented. Example, if it was a contemporary setting and it's modern day, our world, comments like, hey, magic doesn't exist, it's fine. But when you start talking about urban fantasy or any other realm of fantasy, high fantasy, pick a fantasy, when you start talking about that, you go, well, magic can exist, so is this magic believable within the context that we've given? Readers will apply their normal to everything that is not explained. So, for example, we have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If your year of your manuscript is 40 days, you need to tell us this, because we're going to be confused as anything if you don't. As somebody providing feedback, we will highlight anything that doesn't make sense. We need to, because that's information that the writer needs to understand. If we're providing subject matter reviews, then we might provide information to some reference materials that may have eluded somebody for the little details. I will do this myself within my own working with clients. Depending on what the subject matter is, I have a background in science, and so if the science doesn't work for me, guess what? I'm going to point it out. Encourage writers to hang a lantern on things that are known differences to the norm. Either that or actually explain them. For example, like I said before, 365 days a year, if your year has got only 40 or 80 days, we need to know this, or we're going to be applying the 365 days per year on this. Another way of thinking about it would be, okay, bringing up another science fiction example. Let's say one side of your planet is always in the dark and is always night, and the other side of your planet is always day. We need to know this. However, you don't need to explain it in detail why it's like that. We don't need to know that information. We just need to know that you, as the writer, know that this is not normal. Have a character comment on it, and then we're all good, and we'll accept it. Some subject matter within writing can be socially sensitive. And so as somebody providing feedback, we need to highlight any potential issue that might need to be addressed. You might have somebody that is writing something that's from the LGBT community, and maybe they've taken something in there that could be a bit dodgy. And you need to highlight this as a potential issue because the writer needs to understand where things could potentially cause issues once it's out the door. You're going to look at consistency and the terminology. You're going to point out when things like eye color changes without a plot reason. Okay, if you are writing Twilight and Edward's eyes was constantly changing color, it was a plot reason. We understand this and we're happy to carry on. But if there's no reason for it, point it out. Another inconsistency would be when the helicopter lands because the characters just went splat on the concrete. Did the helicopter actually land? And I kid you not, I've actually read this. This was in Michael Crichton's Prey. Beautiful scene, seeing the overline, coming in, helicopter. Next thing I know, characters are on the concrete. It's like, what? Wait a minute, what just happened? Did that helicopter actually land? That's the information we need. Not everyone understands acronyms or local colloquialisms. So unless you can pick it up from context, you need to explain it. If you don't understand it and you're providing feedback, assume that others don't know it either and point it out. Make sure that the writer knows. Okay, let's talk about the steps of actually providing feedback. Be true to yourself. That is the most important thing. Word your feedback like you would like the feedback worded to you. I know it's a weird statement and we're saying that, do unto others as you do unto yourself. Yeah, that's basically what we're talking about. Make the feedback about the writing, never about the writer. And I have to stress that point. It's the writing that you're commenting on. If you don't like something, be honest, but try to explain why. Because it could be just a personality quirk thing, or there could be something that's a bit off with it that the writer needs to focus on. Try to explain why you don't like something. Try to provide information about the things that you do like as well. And again, try to explain why you liked them. What was about them? What's the mechanism there that you did like? And don't panic about providing feedback that is going to potentially hurt someone's feelings. Feelings will get hurt. Writers are emotionally attached to their writing, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just don't be malicious in your comments. Keep it professional as much as possible and about the writing, and you should be okay. The writing community is a very small community. Don't talk to others about somebody else's work in a way that identifies the writer without the writer's permission, especially if you are being negative in critique on it. You don't want that feedback. We're a tight-knit community and word gets around. This is the same with editors as well. Word gets around. As writers, even as experienced writers, we are all learning our craft and we are all continuing to grow. And that is something that is important to remember. The feedback that you can expect from me as a Black Wolf editor, well, I try to employ what I call the feedback sandwich. So I try to give something positive and then what needs work, followed by something positive. I do employ a mentoring style. So I ensure that my clients understand exactly what my suggestions mean. I take the time to make sure that you understand the mechanisms behind these concepts. I don't dump things in technobabble. There's nothing worse than getting an editorial report where you look at it and you go, what does that mean? So I make sure that you understand it. So it's useful feedback, not just feedback you just don't understand. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll provide a rework, an example of what I mean. So that way you can see it within context within your own work. I am blunt and I'm honest. If I don't like something, I will tell you I don't like it, but I'll also tell you why. But you'll get my reader reactions as well. And that, because that in my mind is just as important. Understanding that, hey, I was emotionally engaged in these sections. That's just as important to know and understand as, hey, these sections didn't work for me. For those whom I've worked with before, I will hold you accountable if I think your writing is not up to your usual standard. I know what you're capable of, and I'll tell you. When I can, I will provide industry insight. I can't always, because sometimes I just don't know where the industry is going. But I will give you as much insight as I can. In our next video, we're going to talk about how to find an editor. So we're gone to the next level. We've gone through critique partners and beta readers, and we are now taking it to an editor. Okay. So we're going to explain what the different types of editors are, what they do. We're going to talk a little bit about rates and what you could potentially expect to pay. And we're going to talk about some general guidelines on how you might find and interview your editors. That video should be available for you in the next couple of days. In the meantime, if you have any questions about today's topic or any of the other topics that we've talked about previously, feel free to reach out and you can contact me on Twitter, and that's at blackwolf_ed, or you can find me on Facebook, and that's Black Wolf Editorial, or you can find me on my website, and that's blackwolfeditorial.com. Alternatively, if you're interested in my personal projects, you can find me on Twitter, and that's at Judy L. Moore, or you can find me on my website, and that's judylmoore.com. Meanwhile, I look forward to helping you take your writing to the next level.